Hey guys, welcome back to Based MMA. In this video, I'm going to be talking about my most anticipated fights 2024 edition. We're 6 months into the year. We've already gotten some big fights, but in this video, I'm going to be talking about some fights that I'm looking forward to that I believe could happen by the end of this year. Some of these fights have already been announced. Some of these fights are kind of rumored. Some we know are kind of happening. And then some fights are just me putting my best educated guess of who they're going to fight next. And starting at number 10, one fight that I really want to see and I think could take place in Abu Dhabi is Jamal Hill versus Magomed Ankalaev. I know that Magomed Ankalaev perhaps has earned that title shot against Alex Pereira or Yuri Prohaska, right? We need to see what happens in that fight, because if Yuri Prohaska beats Alex Pereira in the rematch, I don't think Magomed Ankalaev is going to get the next title shot. I think the UFC would make that trilogy first. So then Magomed Ankalaev would be in a very weird position, which is why I think, right? Obviously, I think Alex Pereira is probably going to win that fight. I just don't think Alex Pereira is going to be ready to fight in Abu Dhabi. I think he's going to wait until November, December. And because of that, I think Magomed Ankalaev is going to want to fight somebody in Abu Dhabi. And I think Jamal Hill would be a great opponent. I just think that fight stylistically would be absolutely incredible. I think Jamal Hill would kind of be a difficult matchup for Magomed Ankalaev, but Magomed Ankalaev also has amazing boxing fundamentals. He has grappling. I would love to see that fight. I think the winner of that fight would probably earn a title shot. I understand that you could argue that Magomed Ankalaev has already done enough to earn that title shot, but he wasn't willing to step in on short notice to fight Alex Pereira at UFC 303. And he also, I believe, wasn't ready to fight at UFC 300. So, look, before he beat Johnny Walker, he had a controversial decision, a draw against John Blachowicz. So it's not like Magomed Ankalaev. I mean, I know he's on a pretty good win streak, like he hasn't lost, but his last couple of performances haven't been against like elite competition. He had a draw against John Blachowicz, and he knocked out a Johnny Walker who's basically getting knocked out every other weekend. So it's not all that impressive. And I would love to see a matchup between Jamal Hill and Magomed Ankalaev in the meantime. Now knowing that Jamal Hill pulled out of his fight against Carlos Ulberg, I would love to see that fight for Abu Dhabi. I think it's a big fight for Abu Dhabi. The problem right now is that Alex Pereira is fighting in June. He's not going to be ready to fight in Abu Dhabi. He's going to want to take some time off. And like I said, if Yuri Prohaska wins that fight, then the UFC is going to make that trilogy first, because it would be a big fight, right? If Yuri goes out there and knocks out Alex Pereira in the second fight, I mean, the third fight is going to sell pretty well. People are going to be excited for that. They're going to forget about Magomed Ankalaev. And I think right now Magomed Ankalaev needs to cement himself as the number one contender and face somebody like Jamal Hill. It's one of those fights that I would love to see. I think Jamal Hill also would probably have a good chance of winning that fight. I mean, I'd probably side with Magomed Ankalaev just based on the circumstances that Hill is going into that fight with. But man, I would love to see that fight. So for that reason, that fight is at my number 10. Now, at my number 9, a fight that we complain about every other week, Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic. Look. I understand this fight shouldn't be happening. We kind of already accepted that the UFC really wants to make this fight, that Dana White really wants to see this fight. And we know Stipe Miocic hasn't fought in 4 or 5 years, is coming off a knockout loss against Francis Ngannou, hasn't been active, is getting a lot older, over 40 years old. It's a fight that probably shouldn't be happening next. Stipe Miocic probably should not be fighting, and Jon Jones probably should not be fighting, but he is coming off an injury. And as much as I don't want to see this fight, because the fight to make should be Jon Jones versus Tom Aspinall. The night of the fight, the day of the fight, I'm going to be very excited to see Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic, because I want to see how Jon Jones looked like. Look, he beat Cyril Gane in very easy fashion. It was light work for Jon Jones, and we really didn't see how he would do in the heavyweight division. Like, that fight was so short that we still don't know how good Jon Jones is at this point in his career. And maybe if Stipe Miocic, he's taking time off, he's recovered, he hasn't taken a lot of damage in the last couple of years. Maybe that's helped his body regenerate, whatever. I think it could be a competitive fight. I think Stipe, could do a lot better. Now, as time passes, it's probably worse for Stipe Miocic because he's getting older. He's getting rusty. He's going to have ring rust. But also, Jon Jones hasn't been in the cage for all that long before fighting Cyril Gane. Against Cyril Gane, he was fighting for like 2-3 minutes. The fight was basically over, submitted Cyril Gane in easy fashion. And before that, he hadn't fought since his fight against Dominic Reyes. So I think even though it's not the fight that should happen next, the day of the fight, I mean, how can you not be excited to see Jon Jones fight? He's a big star. He's gonna sell the fight. It's a fight that we've been looking forward to. That feels kind of cursed, like the Conor McGregor versus Chandler fight. But I'm gonna be honest, like I'm still gonna be very excited to watch this fight to see what happens. You never know, man. It's fucking MMA. Stipe can land a good shot and drop Jon Jones. You just never know in this game. And like I said, even though Jon Jones is coming off that impressive performance over Ciryl Gane, it's not like he's been in the cage for all that long. It's not like he's been active. So there's still a lot of questions when it comes to Jon Jones and how good he is at this point in his career. Like there's still a lot of questions. And if he goes out there and just steamroll a Stipe Miocic and Stipe puts like a good performance out there, like he actually shows up and like actually fights pretty well, and Jon Jones beats Stipe, I think that people are going to be more forgiving of Jon Jones fighting Stipe Miocic. Now, if Stipe goes out there and makes it very competitive against Jon Jones, and it's kind of a very like silly fight, both of them look old, then I think, you know, it would make a lot of sense for Jon Jones to retire and not fight somebody like Tom Aspinall. So I think Jon Jones versus Stipe, as much as we don't want to see that fight, I think it's going to say a lot about where Jon Jones is in his career. And because of that, I'm very excited for it. Now, number 8, Movsar Evloev versus Aljamain Sterling. I know a lot of MMA fans don't like Movsar. A lot of MMA fans don't like Aljamain Sterling. But the reason why I'm looking forward to this fight, and like I said, it hasn't been announced. It's rumored. Both of these guys are going back and forth on X. I think stylistically, this is an incredible fight. I love it stylistically. Both of these guys have amazing grappling, and I think Movsar probably has an advantage on the feet, but, you know, Funk Master is very funky on the feet and kind of has underrated striking, and he has bulked up for the featherweight division. I want to see this fight. I think this would be an amazing fight. I mean, Movsar Evloev is undefeated. Aljamain Sterling is considered the bantamweight GOAT. I think there's a lot on the line for both these guys, and I think the buildup would actually be pretty fun. This is one of those underrated fights that I really want to see just because of the grappling exchanges. I want to see how Aljamain Sterling is able to deal with that, how Movsar is able to deal with that. And I'm also curious to see how the striking would play out. So because of that, it's one of those fights that I truly want to see. Now, at number 7, it's kind of similar to Jon Jones versus Stipe, Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler. I know at this point we're fucking tired of this fight because it gets announced and then it doesn't happen and then Conor's not ready. This fight should have happened like almost 2 years ago, a year ago. And it hasn't happened because Conor wasn't in the USADA pool. He was still dealing with an injury. He was busy promoting a movie. And all this time, Michael Chandler has been waiting for Red Panty Night. And it just seems like it's not going to happen. And then we find out that Conor McGregor pulled out of UFC 303 due to an injury, a broken fucking pinky toe. And that only like lowers the chances of this fight happening. But I still believe, I still have a little bit of hope that this fight is going to happen by the end of the year, McGregor versus Chandler. And even though obviously McGregor is not taking the sport seriously, even though we know he's not at the prime, at the peak of his career and athleticism, I still think that it's one of those fights that you just can't fucking miss. Like Conor McGregor, one of the most exciting fighters inside the cage. Like it's rare that you get there's never been a boring Conor McGregor fight. And I would argue there's also never been a boring Michael Chandler fight. Like these are two of the most exciting fighters in the UFC. Somebody's going to get knocked out and I just cannot wait for this fight. Look, I'm a big Conor McGregor fan. I'm a big fan of Michael Chandler. And the moment that they're inside that octagon, it's going to be fucking exciting. Like it's one of the best matchups you can make. And I think that it's one of the best fights you can make for Conor McGregor at this point in his career. That's fucking high level that he could win, right? I don't think there's a lot of guys right now in the lightweight division that are ranked that Conor McGregor can beat besides somebody like a Michael Chandler. Michael Chandler could land a fucking bomb, knock out Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor can land that left hand and draw Michael Chandler and finish him. It could be a very competitive fight. I think it's one of the best fights the UFC can make right now. And like I said, even though we're kind of burned out with hearing about McGregor versus Chandler, I still believe that it's one of the best fights the UFC can make right now. Now at number 6, we have Islam Makhachev versus Armen Suykin. And I think some people are going to be surprised that I even have this fight on the list. I think people are underestimating Armen Suykin going into this fight because he had a very competitive and close fight against Charles Olivera. We just saw what Islam Makhachev was able to do to Dustin Poirier on the feet with his boxing. And look, I think Armen Suykin is probably the best grappler, maybe besides Gamrot, in the lightweight division. I think Armen Suykin is that good. He's very elusive on the feet. He's very flexible, throws pretty good axes, good body kicks. You know, I think he's improving. He has speed with his hands. He doesn't have the best combinations. He doesn't have the best setups. He's a little bit, he's not good defensively sound when it comes to his striking. Islam Makhachev has shown that he has amazing striking, a lot of power, good combinations. I think this fight is going to be very competitive. I don't see Islam Makhachev knocking out Armen Suykin. And I think Armen Suykin can make it kind of a difficult fight for Islam Makhachev. One of the things I've noticed with Islam is that he does kind of tend to fade as the fight goes on. I feel like his cardio doesn't hold up. And if Armen Suykin, can hold up and make it competitive in those early rounds, I think Armen Suykin could potentially win those later rounds. Now, like I said, we haven't really seen Armen Suykin in a 5-round fight. I mean, we saw it against Mateusz Gamrot, and in that fight, he started to lose the later rounds. So maybe Armen Suykin doesn't have the best cardio either. But I think it would be very competitive. I think Armen Suykin is young. He's improving. He's been there with Islam Makhachev. He has a chip on his shoulder. This is the fight he's been wanting for a very, very long time. I feel like Islam Makhachev kind of sees him like a little brother. And I think Armen gets annoyed by that. And I think the build-up for this fight is going to be very fun. Armen Suykin is kind of a dick. Islam Makhachev, he loves to talk shit. I love this fight. I really want to see Islam Makhachev versus Armen Suykin, probably for Abu Dhabi. I think that would be an incredible main event. I think Armen Suykin has shown that he's the #1 contender in this division. Beating somebody like Charles Olivera isn't easy. I understand that the fight was kind of competitive, but still, man, Armen Suykin showed amazing grappling. I think he's improving his striking, and one of his best qualities is Armen Suykin's confidence. Like, this guy is a very, very confident guy, and I think he's going to game plan well against Islam Makhachev. Islam is probably very confident with his hands. I think Islam is going to try to keep this fight on the feet and maybe win by a decision, but it's one of those fights that I still want to see, even though people don't believe that it's going to be competitive. Now, on number 5, this is a fight that's kind of been rumored. Kamaru Usman versus Shaka Romanov. Now, obviously, Shaka Romanov probably should have fought JDM, right? That probably should have been the #1 contender fight, but we know JDM is still dealing with an infection. He's taking a lot of antibiotics. His body's still recovering, and I think the fight to make right now is Usman versus Shaka for a #1 contender fight in Abu Dhabi. I would love to see that fight. Look, Kamaru Usman hasn't fought in quite a while. He's taking some time off, and I don't think Kamaru Usman is as washed as people make it out to be. I thought he put a good performance against Khamzat Chimaev on short notice. Shaka Romanov, I wasn't all that impressed with his performance over Stephen Thompson, even though he was able to submit somebody like Stephen Thompson, who doesn't get submit all that much. I know Wonderboy gets controlled and taken down by guys like Bilal Muhammad, Gilbert Burns, but he's still not a guy that's getting submitted. And I think Shaka Romanov has an amazing chin. He has power. He's not as technical on the feet, but he's a great submission artist. He has good takedowns, good trips. A fight against Kamaru Usman, who has a great jab, good right hand, has a lot of power, very strong. I want to see that fight so bad. I want to see Shaka Romanov versus Kamaru Usman. I know people wanted to see Kamaru Usman stay in the middleweight division, but I think right now the middleweight division is very stacked right now. It's very filled. Like, right now, Robert Whittaker is kind of in a weird spot. We don't know what's going to happen with him. We don't know what's going to happen between Cannonier and Imavov. Is the UFC going to run that back? So I don't think there's a lot of space for Kamaru Usman to go to the middleweight division. I think it's better for Kamaru Usman to stay in the welterweight division when, let's be honest, like, there's still a lot of contenders he can fight and could probably beat at 170. So I want to see Shaka Romanov versus Kamaru Usman. That is at my number 5. Now, at number 4, this is a fight that just got announced recently. DDP versus Adesanya. I really want to see this fight because I think it's very competitive. I think you can make a solid case for Adesanya winning. Every time that Adesanya is a contender, he fucking shows up with Gyno, and all of a sudden he has crazy fucking power, and he goes out there and wins. And he also has beef against DDP. And DDP has shown that he's a fucking real deal, that even though he's kind of looked like a sloppy guy on the feet, he's good at game planning. He's a lot more technical. He has good fight IQ. He has good cardio, and he has the heart of a fucking lion. So I want to see DDP versus Adesanya. I think this is make or break for Izzy, and I think this is really going to show how good Dricus du Plessis is if he's able to go out there, take down Adesanya, beat him up, land shots on the feet, and just dominate him for 5 rounds, because that's how I see DDP winning this fight. I think DDP is probably going to win by a domination, just dominating Adesanya from round 1 to round 5, or just having a very competitive fight. While Adesanya, I think he needs to go out there and knock out Dricus du Plessis, and it could happen. Like, Adesanya can go out there and knock out DDP, make no mistake about that. But I think the build-up, the fight week, everything riding on the line, I want to see this fight so bad. I'm glad that the UFC announced it. I understand that Adesanya doesn't deserve this title shot whatsoever, but it's one of the biggest fights the UFC can make right now, and I don't think the UFC is going to pass on the opportunity to have this beef between DDP and Adesanya get settled. Like, I don't think they're going to pass up on that. Adesanya has UFC privilege. Of course, he's going to get another rematch, even though he had already gotten his guaranteed rematch against Pereira in the rematch. Nobody complained about that. He fought Sean Strickland, lost. Probably should have fought another contender in the meantime, but he wanted to take some time off. Drake has won the title. And like I said, this fight is a 50-50. Like, I'm going to be scared for Drake du Plessis going into this fight, which is why I'm very excited for it. Now, at number 3, this is a fight that's kind of been rumored, not by the UFC, but by one of those fighters. Colby Covington versus Charles Oliveira. I want to see this fight so bad. Charles Oliveira is one of my favorite fighters, and I think he could beat the shit out of Colby Covington. Now, a prime Colby, if Colby actually shows up, not the Colby that showed up against Leon Edwards, he could put up a good fight against Charles Oliveira, who struggled against heavy grapplers with good pace. I think Colby is very live to win this fight. Like, the problem is that I just don't think Colby's hungry anymore. I don't think he cares about fighting. So I would love to see Charles Oliveira either knock him out or submit him. Like, that would really shut him up. I think that's a big fight. I understand that the buildup is going to be a little bit weird because Charles Oliveira doesn't speak a lot of English. He doesn't talk a lot of shit. It's going to be weird for Colby Covington to talk shit to a Brazilian like Charles Oliveira, who's going to be like, you're not even going to understand what he's saying back. It's going to be a weird buildup, but it's one of those fights that once it got brought up, I was like, man, I actually really want to see that. And I think it makes sense for Charles Oliveira at this point in his career, who doesn't really care about being the champion. I would love to see it. And I mean, Charles Oliveira is a big lightweight. Colby Covington is kind of an undersized welterweight. I think it makes a lot of sense. It's one of those fights that I really want to see, that I hope happens. Colby Covington versus Charles Oliveira would be a massive fight. You could put it as a co-main event or a featured fight of a pay-per-view. I would love to see it as a 5-round fight. I would love to see that fight. I really want to see it. I think it makes sense for Charles Oliveira if he doesn't want to fight somebody like Mateusz Gamrot. And I think it makes a lot of sense for Colby Covington if he doesn't want to fight a ranked contender in the welterweight division. Now, at number 2, Sean O'Malley versus Merab. I want to see this fight so bad, man. O'Malley has looked absolutely phenomenal. This is probably the best striker in the bantamweight division, maybe the best striker in the UFC. You just can't stand in front of Sean O'Malley. He's going to beat you up with teeps to the body. He has good power. He's slick. He's a sniper. You know, he has good movement, good range management. And man, if there's ever somebody that could knock out Merab, it's Sean O'Malley. But if Sean O'Malley is not able to knock him out, make no mistake, Merab can ragdoll him, dominate him, beat him on the ground. And I mean, that would be crazy to see. I just can't wait for this fight because either O'Malley's going to knock him out, maybe dominate him, or Merab is going to ragdoll him on the ground and just break him, like break his fucking spirit. And I just can't wait for this fight. It's a fight that we've been talking about. I put my channel on the line. I was like, I think O'Malley's going to knock out Merab. I just think that when Merab closes the distance, there's that space that O'Malley is very good at, and he has a sniper. He has an amazing right hand. He has a lot of power. We've seen Merab get hurt by guys like Henry Cejudo, but I mean, O'Malley, once he hurts Merab, he needs to capitalize on it because Merab has amazing cardio. He's very good at recovering. He has a heart of a lion as well. And I really want to see this fight. I want to see this fight for the Sphere. I want to see it soon. I think Merab has proven that he's the #1 contender in the bantamweight division. I mean, to ragdoll somebody like Henry Cejudo, I get it. Henry Cejudo is not in the prime of his career, but to do that to Henry Cejudo is still super impressive to me. I mean, beating Peter Yan in that way, breaking from round 1 to round 5, like nobody has made Peter Yan look like that. Like, Merab is an absolute animal, and I want to see O'Malley versus Merab get settled. I just really want to see this fight. If O'Malley's able to beat Merab, I mean, he might be the best bantamweight of all time. If Merab beats O'Malley, like, who's gonna beat fucking Merab? Like, he's a fucking monster. I just really want to see this fight. There's a lot at stake, and I think O'Malley is one of the most exciting fighters in the UFC. And I think even though Merab on paper doesn't have the most exciting style, I think his fights are actually pretty fun to watch. So that's why it's on my number 2. Now, my number 1, no surprise here, Topuria versus Holloway. This is a fight that we need to see next. Holloway put an incredible performance over Justin Gaethje. Not just the viral knockout at the end of the fight. He beat Justin Gaethje from round 1 to round 5, basically dominated him. Holloway looked absolutely incredible. Now, the problem here is that Holloway has to move down to 145 pounds again. So he has to cut weight. He just properly bulked up to the lightweight division. Now he has to cut down in weight. And I just don't think he has that same power at 145 pounds. Like, I understand that in the featherweight division, he doesn't really try to sit with his punches. It's more of volume, touching you and just winning you with volume, pause. I think the problem here is that Topuria is getting better. He's younger. He's undefeated. He's super confident coming off that win over Alexander Volkanovski. And even though you guys want to make excuses and say that the reason why Volkanovski lost that fight is because it was on short notice and because he was coming off a knockout loss to Islam Makhachev, guys, Topuria set that up pretty well and was just timing Volkanovski. Like, you could tell that Ilia Topuria knew Volkanovski's tendencies and was able to expose them. And I think he's going to do this against Max Holloway, who we've seen lose to Alexander Volkanovski. Like, it's not like people cannot beat Max Holloway. I mean, Volkanovski is a very special fighter. Actually, I don't agree with what I just said. I think not a lot of people can beat Max Holloway if you're not Alexander Volkanovski. And I think Topuria is one of those guys that I think could beat Max Holloway just because of the power, because of the boxing, because of the pressure. I think he's going to pressure Max Holloway up against the fence. But Max Holloway has pretty good footwork. He could make it kind of an annoying fight for Ilia Topuria, and I could see him annoying Ilia Topuria and beating him. And I just think it's such a 50-50 matchup. Initially, I was like, you know what? I think Topuria easily beats him. I don't think so anymore. I think Max Holloway is going to be a difficult fight for Topuria. I don't see Topuria knocking out Max Holloway. I think if Topuria wins, it's going to be by a 5-round decision. Maybe Max Holloway's chin finally goes out if Topuria lands the right shot. That could definitely happen. I just don't see it happening. I think Max Holloway, his confidence is at an all-time high. Beating someone like Justin Gaethje in the lightweight division is absolutely incredible. Now, obviously, this is a different stylistic fight because Topuria is a lot more technical than somebody like Justin Gaethje, a lot more defensively sound. And I think Topuria has shown that he's getting a lot better. But Max Holloway has also shown that he struggles against guys that are a little bit shorter than him, like Alexander Volkanovski. I think this fight is amazing, man. I cannot wait for this fight. This is a fight that I'm really looking forward to. Probably going to happen at the UFC Sphere. And I really, really want to see this fight. I mean, man, like, honestly, that's why I still watch the UFC, because I think about Topuria and Holloway and I'm like, man, that fight really gets me excited. Like, I really want to see Topuria versus Holloway. Holloway is doing amazing. Like, I know, like, after that Volkanovski trilogy, we're like, man, maybe Max Holloway is going to start to decline. He took a lot of damage against Volkanovski in that third fight, but Max Holloway still showing that he's the best featherweight in the world besides Alexander Volkanovski, and maybe he's hit his new prime. And he's facing someone like Ilia Topuria, who's undefeated, super confident, super cocky, you know, amazing boxing, insane power in the featherweight division. I want to see this fight so bad, and I hope that it happens next. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe. Let me know what fights you're looking forward to that might be happening by the end of the year. I hope you guys have a good one, and I'll see you guys in the next one.